I'm Jimmy Lewis, and on this special episode of Tech Talk Taco Tuesday, we are going to talk about helmet safety. So, I do a little bit of a deep dive with Jason Thomas, who is from Fly Racing. Of course, they have the Formula helmet, which I just started wearing, and it got me thinking again, which I'm always thinking about, helmet safety. And we talk about, things you should consider when purchasing your next helmet. A lot of stuff about the standards, the materials, especially the evolution of materials and why now would be a really good time to be thinking about getting a new helmet. And on top of that, we do a little bit of bench racing. Talk about the old days when I was at Dirt Rider, we tested one of his race bikes. So hope you enjoy this and support the show. Reach out, and if you have questions, if you have ideas on topics that you'd like us to talk about, give us a little note and support us. Shop through Amazon, and we've got some real interesting stuff coming up in the near future. So with that, here's our interview. Okay, I'd like to bring Jason Thomas on to the Tech Talk Taco Tuesday podcast show. Jason is with Fly. You are the brand manager?
Yeah, brand manager and then media relations manager as well.
So you have to deal with all of us donkeys,
right? To put it bluntly, they just tell me to get out in front of whatever needs to be said. That's really what it comes down to.
And so I have helmet safety questions.
Sure.
And so this is the guy I turn to. And the reason I turn to Jason is because of all the people I listen to on different podcasts and shows I've interacted with in this industry, people are very, very brand loyal. And I've heard Jason talk about helmets specifically because they have an awesome helmet in the Formula, talk about all the technology, but you talk about it honestly. And then you guys just did something this year, which I thought was really good, is you took your premium stuff and put it into a lower price point helmet. Because typically the high end, the best stuff only stays in the high end thing. So having done this helmet safety test back at Dirt Rider back in the day, I know a lot about helmets, but a lot of stuff has changed, and I wanted to learn some new things. And the biggest thing I think that since then has been a lot of the rotational stuff that's come into play. So what is it that you guys are doing, and kind of explain that on that front?
Yeah. So really going back 7 or 8 years ago, this whole concept really started. And, I will give 60 a lot of credit because I think they forced the hand of everyone. They really took a giant step forward innovation, and they proved that helmets could be better than simply a shell and some EPS, and it could be taken to a new level. And I think they were even pushed by the NFL and the concussion problems they had. So for us, we saw a definite need and a want to elevate our game. And then, the tough question there is, well, how? What technology is out there? It's easy to identify a problem, but until you have some sort of technology or an answer to that problem, you're not really anywhere. So that set us off on a mission to, and it was very simple from our owner. Is the directive was to build the best and safest helmet the world has seen. And that sounds really grandiose, I understand, but that was what he asked, right? And there were really no limits. There were no restrictions. It was, I don't want to say a blank check because you always have to be mindful, but it wasn't, and I want you to spend $100, right? It was like, no, let's go build this thing. Let's take the next step as far as helmets go. So that set us off on a quest, talking to literally everyone. You go to motorcycle shows, you talk to anyone and everyone that'll listen, and you're really just trying to find out what's out there, what's on the horizon, what are people working on that maybe they don't even have the idea for an application into a helmet yet, but maybe we can bring that idea to them.
And you're talking about at that point, materials.
Correct. Yeah. Energy absorbing materials, anything supplemental that you can add to a helmet, just what is being innovated worldwide to absorb energy. That's what it really comes down to in a nutshell, is a motorcycle crash or any type of impact like that, a bicycle crash, anything, is you're absorbing energy. And how do you absorb it without transferring it to your body or your brain? And how do you disperse it without having any sort of negative impact upon you? And that's the game, right? That's what we're all trying to accomplish, no matter what protection piece you're building. And of course, helmets being the most important of those. So we were fortunate enough to meet a gentleman named Dr. Dan Plant at a trade show in England. And it was kind of serendipity. The timing was right. He had just exited a couple years before a project for the British government and military, and with the same goal. They wanted to elevate their protection level on whether being penetrated by bullets or IEDs in military theater. Anything that a bomb or a bullet would penetrate, they wanted to find something better than Kevlar. That was the goal. Like, we need to take the next steps. We need to keep our people safer that are in harm's way. So he developed this material called armor gel at the time. This is what he called it back. This is 2010 timeframe that he was developing this. And so he develops that. There was a grant from the British government. Success. They use it to this very day. It lines their bulletproof vests. It lines the bottom of their, I don't want to say, I don't think Humvee is the right word anymore, but they're vehicles they would take into military theater, right? And if something explodes upward, they drive over it, it's going to help absorb that energy as it explodes up into the belly of whatever vehicle it is. Same thing with a bulletproof vest, it's going to absorb that energy.
And it's part of a layered system. So it's an intermediate layer.
So for that particular use, it was the primary source of protection.
Okay.
I would bet, I don't know for sure, but I would bet that they use it in conjunction with Kevlar somehow. But it was, in its purest sense, built to be a Kevlar replacement long term. That's the goal for them. So it was a success. Everything went great. He won tons of awards, and you can see all that stuff on whether it's his personal website or Rion about all that history there. But for him, deep down, he has always been a motorcycle mountain bike guy. He's an enthusiast, just like we are. So for him, it was like, okay, I created this amazing technology. How can I now transfer that into something that I actually like? Something that I'm actually passionate about. This was work before. This military exercise before was work. It was a means to an end of how to get the resources, the funding to develop this. But now it was his opportunity to really try to make a difference in not only his own personal safety, but apply it to a market that was desperate for something like this. And, when we met with him, you're trying to find out, well, does this stuff work? Is it applicable? Can we make that transition to power sports? And then once we started doing some preliminary testing, he started showing us his ideas of how this could be applied. It was kind of that eureka moment where, okay, now we're 2014, 2015, and we're still 4 years away from a finished product, but you see where this is going, right? Everybody that was involved on our end knew that we were onto something. We just had to be able to execute, get the application right. And there's a lot of steps in there and a lot of fails along the way too, right? That's not going to work. That's not going to work. It's trial and error on every level for years. But that was really the history of it. It was just the right timing of a technology that had nothing to do with power sports. But if you really saw it through, it could and can be and will be applied moving forward into all kinds of items.
I mean, that you think about chest protectors, same things.
Mm-hmm.
Certain kinds of braces, protective stuff.
Yep, and it's not exclusive. It's not exclusive to helmets. Think about other materials, D3O, the same kind of idea, right? We're all trying to accomplish the same goals. It's just finding appropriate ways to apply them that are going to keep people safer.
Right, and so inside of that helmet, what the Rion is doing is those are besides the line the soft liner.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the contact points essentially with your skull.
Right. So inside the helmet, you have these Rion energy cells, right? So there are, I believe, 7 inside below the liner of the helmet that are embedded into the Conehead EPS system of the carbon formula has Conehead EPS. So the beauty of Rion, when it really comes down to it, is ultra lightweight, which is incredible, right? That's how we get such a lightweight helmet. The carbon that's just to your left there is 2.79 pounds. It's incredibly light, especially when you factor in that it has to pass DOT, so we have to reinforce the chin bar and things there too.
Yep.
But the magic really is, for a helmet, you're trying to accomplish 2 goals. You're trying to slow down any sort of linear impact and absorb that energy. And then, of course, the rotational that we all learned, 6, 7, 8 years ago, how critical that was to be able to disperse that rotational energy.
You want it to rotate a certain amount.
Sure.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Well, you just want to be able to allow the energy to be deflected. instead of transferred into your brain, right? So
Yep.
the helmet and the energy, regardless of the system you're using, if the helmet or the material inside the helmet can slide and rotate a minute amount, that is going to absorb the energy. That's going to let that impact be shifted away from you and absorbed in that slide or movement, which is the Rheon material actually moves itself.
Yep.
Instead of your brain moving inside your skull. That's in the most
The
concise
simplest.
nutshell you can make, right? Is if the material moves and the helmet slides versus your brain sliding inside your skull, you're
Yep.
accomplishing everything you'd want to.
And so some of the other systems like the 6D has some dampers, rotational dampers in it. There's
Yep.
MIPS that is another way of doing this.
Right.
And then like a helmet that doesn't have it, you would kind of hope that maybe the liner would slide, the soft material liner would slide inside there. But when you've got an impact, the problem is when you've got an impact pressing on,
Right.
compressing everything, it doesn't allow it to shift and slide. And so I've seen some people put on a helmet that has like a MIPS in there and they go, look, it does this. And it's like, well, it's kind of supposed to do that. Maybe not as easy as, that. And that's where fit comes into play quite a bit too.
Correct.
So, and then you're combining Rheon with, like you said, the cone head technology, which it's double density EPS, and kind of explain that. You used it like when you're talking about like a traffic cone.
Yeah. So cone head it's still the base material is EPS, which is found in pretty much every helmet, on Earth. The EPS is widely considered the standard as far as energy absorbing material as a base. But we found this cone head material, which is sourced out of Australia. And we were not involved in the development of Conehead. We don't really have a relationship with them other than we're a customer for building our helmets. But what they found, similar to a crumple zone in a car or similar to like a traffic cone, if you use two different layers, especially in a crumple zone, and one is softer and one is denser, if you have a softer outer layer, that's going to really be beneficial in slower, lower speed impacts. So you have a softer outer shell that's going to absorb a softer impact, making that shell a little bit softer. But as that compresses and the energy is ramped up, as the crash gets more violent and the impact level goes up, you want that to get stiffer so it's absorbing more and more and more. So a harder impact, you're going to blow through that outer layer of the softer conehead EPS pretty quickly and get into the denser layer as your final layer of protection before you get to the Rheon. The interesting thing about the conehead is it has, just like it would sound, cones of material drilled into, so it works just like a traffic cone would, and uses the physics there to slow that down even further. So it's pretty interesting. We have, on our website and in our catalog, it really does a great job of diagramming all those things and the forces at play. But we tested both with and without conehead, and we saw benefit of using it. It did help, especially on the linear impact, more than standard EPS did.
Yeah, and when we did the helmet test back at Dirt Rider back in the day, the helmet that performed the best, and we couldn't figure out like why, because you just looked inside of it. We weren't really cutting them in half yet. We looked inside of it, and it was like it looked like almost every other helmet. When we cut the helmets open to analyze, because they did catastrophic impacts on them, and they had to measure things and look at them. When they cut it open, it's like, oh, look at this, and it was essentially they kind of channeled the EPS, and they were real specific about how they did it. It was just a brilliant design, and it was the best performing helmet in the test, and we kind of equated that. And like shortly after that, didn't take very long for that to get picked up on and copied. But what I think consumers have to understand is that like helmets are kind of one-time use items. In other words, if you have a good crash and you hit your head and the helmet does its job, it absorbs that impact, that EPS is crushing, and it's no longer going to absorb to the same level that it did the first time. It's not going to be as effective. And so I think it comes down to kind of, when we start talking about the price point, when you're, if you're crashing in a $600 helmet every month, then you need a new helmet, that can be very expensive. And so I think for a lot of people, that gets to be a difficult, question. Is like, well, do I spend $600 once and crash in it 3 times, or should I be replacing a $250 helmet on a more regular basis?
Yeah, it's really tough. As you said, EPS is not resilient, right? If you compress or compromise the EPS on your helmet, from our perspective and most helmet manufacturers that I've ever talked to, that helmet is either needs to be replaced or refurbished or some combination of that. So it is challenging. Of course, we hate to see a customer that has just been kept safe by a helmet be, of course, they're going to be some level of bummed out because they have to buy a new helmet. But yeah, that's just the unfortunate side of it. Hopefully long term, a decade from now, who knows? Maybe it's next year. We don't know. But if we could find some material that was resilient and would remain uncompromised after a serious impact that we could replace EPS with, we would. There just simply hasn't been anything found as a base material that works better than EPS. And unfortunately, that is one of the characteristics of it is it's a one-time impact use. So I think just like anything else, it will evolve. We'll find something else that, I don't want to use a football helmet because I don't believe that football helmets are anywhere near as safe as motocross helmets. But ideally, you could have a helmet that could take 20 impacts and still be uncompromised. That would be great. We're totally open to that.
In the football helmets, they're using some sort of like a kind of a memory foam and there's some gels and stuff that they use inside of those. Yeah. So
but I still, if you ask me point blank, and I've really tried to study this, it's my job to, what is the forefront of helmet technology on Earth? I would say motocross is probably it. I don't see any other industry or sport at all, whether it's, you can talk F1, you can talk MotoGP, you can talk whatever you want. No one is pushing the envelope on material use like motocross helmets are. And I think they'll catch up. I think all of these things will become mainstream, and others. I know Zenith football helmets is a partner with Rion now too. So they've jumped into this game too, because they've seen the benefits of it. And I think it's going to slowly trickle into these other sports. There are other considerations. A Formula One crash, the speeds are so incredibly high that their helmets have a big need to be incredibly dense. They have to have super hard shells to withstand whatever potential impact could happen at 200 miles an hour. I understand that. You could say the same for MotoGP. So I don't think there's always going to be a mirror effect there. But if you go look at the helmets that are in play in those, you don't see them really taking advantage of new age materials quite yet. And I don't know what the reason is for that. I'm not 100% sure.
I think because their impacts are pretty consistent. And then I always say this. It's like, you tell me how you're going to crash. Tell me how you're going to crash, and I can tell you the best helmet. And not necessarily like by brand. I would say then you're looking at a helmet that's this type of shell in this this type of foam. And the good thing is everything seems to be getting a little bit better. But when it starts coming down to cost, you're paying for of course the technology, the implementation of technology comes with cost. That's one thing. But then you're paying for materials that are generally lighter weight and just perform better. Because the lower cost helmets, they have essentially plastic shells, for lack of a better term.
Sure, no, that's fair.
It's lower cost. Well, in certain types of tests, those perform incredibly well,
especially low speed. Yeah, speed crashes, whether it's ABS or polycarbonate or whatever polymer that you're coming up with, low speed impacts do really well with really soft shells, and that you're going to find inexpensive prices on those shells too.
Yeah, and by soft, it's kind of they also, there's certain ones that kind of bounce. The really
right,
low,
right,
and that's bad.
Right.
And that's bad. But it's kind of and then you get into the higher end stuff where it's the carbon and the matrix helmets and stuff like that tend to have the ability to deflect to a certain point and then crush when they need to. And I think a lot of times I always say, look at the standards that the helmets pass and maybe understand some of the standards. And for me, by choice, I like to wear an ECE non-DOT helmet if I'm given the opportunity. Why? It's generally the same as the DOT helmet, just a lot lighter, and maybe they don't have to reinforce.
You want a little bit more flex there.
Yeah, they don't need to reinforce some parts that is not a consideration for me. Like a lot of times the DOT tests are, it's for street accidents and stuff like that, not dirt bike guys kind of, falling over and crashing. And then if I'm, doing like higher speed stuff, then I start thinking, okay, I want, something that's maybe a little bit, then I'd start looking more at like maybe a Snell type rating on a helmet or things like that. Then DOT comes more into play. So, and I notice even on like some of the helmets now on the ECE and some of the European ratings, they're actually putting the weight of the helmet with a plus or minus on the thing. And I think that might be so that there's not knockoffs or something. You could actually test it yourself to see if it's
as far as the weight goes.
Yeah.
Well, from my knowledge anyway, it's because when you're manufacturing, they're pouring helmets, right? So to be within a specific range is the safe way to go about it, because like the Formula Carbon that's next to you, it's 1,290 grams. But if, these are all individually built, and it could be 1310 or it could be 1270 just because it's human error. Someone is actually building that helmet. So it's not something from our perspective, it's not a trademark side. It's more of just, there's still a human building this thing. And if it's 5 or 10 grams in either direction, that's
right.
Kind of what happens.
Yeah, I know there's like I said, there's a plus and minus, but on like some of the other helmets that I've seen, they actually have like the like I said, the weight and the range. And that might be a standard that they have to meet. I'm trying to look at one of these other ones.
Yeah, and I think ours may say that on the back as well.
Yeah, there's typically. I didn't see the stickers. Like we don't. They're not as strict over here as they are in Europe with helmets. That's for sure. As far as like when you go through a scrutineering or something, they're starting to check.
So I have, and I don't know if you can see it, but this is the carbon composite version. So this one's 1,340 grams. On the back, it says plus or minus 50 grams. You can't really see it very well, but it's right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's in there. And are these ECE certified?
Yes, ECE. We went away from Snell in, I want to say 2016, 2017. We went away from the Snell standard.
Yep. And then so now you have a basically a $249 helmet that has all of the same stuff inside that. That one's called the Formula
CP.
And CP correct. Stands for
carbon poly. So basically it's a lot of and we really went that direction because it's the benefits of the carbon helmet that we offer, but it's in a polycarbonate version. So
right. So it's essentially a less expensive to produce shell.
Correct.
What it comes down.
And really for us, this CP helmet was always in the plans. It was down the line, right? We needed to come out with a flagship piece, which was the Formula, the first original Formula. We were able to lower the price point with the carbon composite version, with the CC, which came out, last year? Yeah. So this would be the second iteration of that. And then this final version was really in hopes of offering more safety to the masses. Because, a big part of my job, I get out and I'm in dealerships and I'm talking to, of course, our customer, which is dealer, but then engaging real consumers in the store too. And, I'm at every Supercross and outdoor and all these. So I get a lot of different opinions and perspectives and real life experiences from people. And it's really tough sometimes because I will talk to a mom or a dad or someone that has one child or of course 2, 3, 4 kids that are racing. They simply can't afford to buy, even if it's the carbon composite version, you're at $489 retail. That's, $2,000 when you consider tax for 4 of them. That's a hurdle that they can't get over in a lot of cases, right? So they're having to, in their mind, compromise on safety because of cost. And that's not something we ever want. That's not the goal. So this helmet was always in the works. It was always in the plans. And now hopefully we can lessen that compromise, right? Even if you can just get it on your child as the race helmet or their primary helmet, and they have to have something else as a backup. For us, we believe that at $250, it was manageable for most people. And it really opened the door for a lot of new customers that may have felt like they were excluded simply based on price. Because in the end, our goal is to keep people safer. We are a business, yes, of course, but we believe it's our highest responsibility as a helmet manufacturer is to keep people safe. You can't build protection equipment as a brand and not take that responsibility very seriously. Otherwise, you need to exit that sector, in my opinion. So we're really proud of that. Like the formula is great. I'm extremely proud of every step that we've made with the formula, but this CP version may actually make me feel a little bit better inside, because I know how many more people it's going to be able to reach than that premium piece ever was going to.
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about this, and that's like one of the things. I know you're passionate about it, and I'm the same way. It's like, hey, if a lot of it's just like learning about what the stuff is out there, because a lot of people, they're more worried about the graphics on the side of the helmet.
Right?
They're worried about the graphics and the price, and then it's like really it's the stuff that's inside that's important.
And 10 years ago, I would have agreed with them. I really would have. The difference between a high-end helmet and an entry-level helmet, within reason, right? Not the ones you were talking about that you could bounce off the ground,
right,
but within reason, was negligible. It really, really was. And it wasn't anybody's fault. The technology hadn't caught up yet. If you didn't care about carbon and you didn't care about the replica graphic of your favorite rider, you could jump down a couple $100 and get pretty much the same level of safety and the same level of impact protection. That's just what the situation was. And thankfully, a decade later, that's not the situation at all.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember, there's companies like Arai that were just always just super pushing on the safety side of things. And they had high level athletes, and they did a lot of testing, and they had people there that really knew what was up. And so you had that. And then I was wearing Biaffi helmets.
Mm-hmm. I wore a Biaffi in the year 2000.
There's some hanging up there. I had to get them painted so they didn't look like you had a canteen visor or whatever
right.
the heck they were. But the reason I started wearing those helmets is I was doing a photo shoot on ATV, on quads of all things. We hooked wheels. I got torpedoed up in the air and came down and landed on my head. Photographer, of course, got a photo of it. And the whole time I swore I didn't hit my head. I didn't hit my head. And then he showed me the pictures of, a week later when it got developed, right? Showed me pictures torpedoing my head into the ground. And I'm like, that's a good helmet, because I'd worn bells before. Mm-hmm. And it seems like I get, goofy when I do stuff like this, when I hit my head on the ground. And so I'm like, this is a good helmet. I wanted to start wearing it. So I've always had kind of a, I've had an affection for understanding this and learning about it. And what prompted that whole dirt rider test was another journalist kind of going off the cuff and saying an inexpensive helmet was a pile of crap. And I had just recently crashed in that exact same helmet, that a pretty good one, that he said was a pile of crap. And I'm like, no, that helmet did its job. I actually, opened it up, took it apart, looked at the crushed EPS, looked at, and it was I think it was $149 helmet or something like that at the time. And there was a couple brands that were kind of getting this raft of, they're flooding the market with cheap stuff. And I'm like, well, I looked at it, and it passed certain tests. I looked at it, had the right kind of materials, which at the time was EPS. Yeah, the graphic was horrible and whatever. But I'm like, this helmet seemed, and it fit. And that was another thing that I think kind of goes overlooked sometimes, is how important, fit of a helmet is.
Yeah.
Typically people wear them too loose, just by
you want it as tight as you can possibly stand it.
Yeah, they do it. They do a little too loose. But we actually, in that test, some of the side tests that we did was we put improper head forms inside of. So we put wrong size helmets on the wrong, the right side. How to put this? So put too small of a head inside of a helmet and then smashed it like you're supposed to. And you could take the best helmet that did great at all the tests, and all of a sudden now it was ranking somewhere in the middle. Right. That simple of a thing would change it. And everybody's like, yeah, I'm really concerned about safety. And it's like, then learn about some of these other things. So,
and I think you said it right there, is a lot of it is just people are not educated on this stuff, and that's to be expected. I think that it's gotten better. I think the brands that are pushing the envelope are trying, whether it's television commercials or literature that's out there, we're trying to teach the reasons why you should be taking helmet safety seriously. And the science behind it, which sometimes it's hard to get through. Even for me, it's my job to study this stuff. It can get really tedious at times. And if I talk to, the physicist, Dr. Dan Plant, that designed all this stuff, I'm with him for about 7 seconds. And then he is so far out in left field talking about, the back end of this stuff and the physics behind it. I don't have the education or even the mental capacity to keep up with that. But the basics are really what matters. And I think that information is able to be transferred in a very simplistic way for a lot of people. But that's even still the biggest step for us now, is getting just the most basic information that anyone, just a layman, could understand. And if you can accomplish that, then I really think you're doing something. Because for me, being inside a dealership working, I hear it all the time. They don't even know that I work for Fly at the time or whatever, but a parts manager or someone in a dealership will step away and speak with a customer, and I'll hear the question of, hey, what's the most inexpensive helmet you have? We just need something for our child to go ride in the backyard, whatever. And that stuff makes you cringe, because you think about your head and how critical it is and how potentially dangerous that is. I understand if you're like, okay, well, what's the best value? Is there anything that's giving me next level tech, but can still not break the bank? That's a fair question. And that's one I can respond really well to. But walking in and saying, and the worst is when, what's the cheapest thing you got? And you hear that all the time, and you're just like, no. Like, you want to just sit that person down. But again, that's just, they don't know why. That's the question, is the why. Why would you spend more money?
A lot of times it's, I've heard this, like, oh, that company's just trying to, make money because they have the name or the whatever. And I always look a little bit past that and say, hey, what's inside of it? What's the technology? And that's sort of what what I wanted to talk to you about, just to kind of, go over this, because it is important. But, fit was super important in our test. Weight, the lighter the weight, generally the better results. Those are two things that we could kind of see some correlation. There wasn't a whole lot on price. And this is the one thing I kind of came back to. Price didn't determine how safe a helmet was going to be. So that question is like, what's the best value, or what's the safest helmet, is a really good question for you to be asking a dealership. Hopefully they, or, when you're doing your research online, trying to uncover that stuff, and everybody's going to be kind of pushing their technologies. And I really don't know until I actually test a helmet myself, which is unfortunate that I do it every once in a while. You bump your head around and you go, okay, this did or didn't work. And I really try to study, okay, what kind of was it a side blow? Was it a direct impact? Did I hit my head on a branch on a tree? Did somebody throw something at me and hit me in the head? That happens a lot around here.
Right.
Shut up. I should probably be wearing a helmet when I do this podcast half the time. But
right.
Anyways, so, well, hey, I really want to say thanks. I've just been, this is the first one I've had. This is my wife's, actually. It kind of came. This one came via Johnny Campbell somehow.
Cool.
Through, who knows where our channels of my wife ended up with this helmet one day, and now this is the only one she wants to wear. Hey, bring my red helmet. I want the red helmet.
Yeah. So I think we've been affiliated with Johnny for 15 years now, or something crazy. So who knows? Yeah.
Long time. And so I just got one, and I did a photo shoot in it the other day, and I said, hey, I've been wanting to wear one for a while. And I said, it's a good fitting helmet. It's light. The venting was surprising. I mean, I kind of look at the vents, because I've done a lot of different, wear all different kinds of stuff. And this helmet, and especially as hot as it is, I really did notice the venting. It was good. And like I mentioned to you earlier, the only thing for me was off-road guy. I kind of want this visor to be a little bit longer. I'm actually kind of running it down in this goon. I'd get yelled at the track if I had my visor down where I want it, because I use it. I get roosted. I have to duck a lot, so this kind of stuff happens. But we all have our own special needs, I guess they say. So, but thanks for coming. So, hey, I got a question for you, just to off topic. Do you remember when we rode at Dirt Rider? We rode one of your bikes, your race bikes, after a national.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which bike it was. I do remember this.
Was it at Southwick, or was it at No, it would have been.
Gosh, I remember, but I don't remember which. I do remember this happening, but I had 16 different years of bikes. Unfortunately, I can't remember which bike it was.
It was probably a Honda, correct?
Yeah. Unless it was super late, it would have been a Honda. And it probably would have been really difficult for anybody normal height to ride, because I had lower seat and taller foot pegs and all these things at the time modified on my bike.
I was gonna say this, because how tall are you?
Like 5'6", 5'6.5", something like that. Pretty short.
Right. So I remember and I probably have ridden more different factory bikes and racer bikes and stuff than a lot of guys, just because that's what we like to do. And I mean, my thing was, I wasn't going to say your bike was good or bad, because it's your bike. It's good for you, right? And I remember riding your bike, and I remember it being quite horrible for me.
Yeah,
and I'm at 5'10", just because of the stuff you said. But I'm like, this guy has a setup, and this is this works for, and I think even your power, I think the way that I think the bike had a big hit. Does that
Yeah,
sound?
that's definitely what I would have wanted for sure.
And I
Yep.
hate that.
And you
It
know
was,
what?
for me,
So
it was uncontrollable. So
right,
I
right.
was I was out of balance or out of sync on the motorcycle because it's putting me in a weird spot.
Hmm.
And then it just had a big hit of power. And it
Yep.
was like,
Well, and all that
great.
stuff was strategic on my part, right? And it was just from years of knowing strengths and weaknesses and trying to lessen the weaknesses and heighten my strengths, right? Highlight the attributes that I did have. For me, I was shorter, of course, which we talked about. So I was always trying to gain clearance between the seat and my butt, right? Because you get out of shape, the seat hits you in the butt, and bad things happen from there always, right?
Yes.
That's the catalyst for bad things happening. So I was always trying to create that clearance without giving away too much as far as cornering. That was always the challenge. Is I wanted the rear really low, but then that makes it that much harder to corner. So I
Yep.
was always battling clamps and races and all that stuff to try to find a happy medium there. But then in my riding style, I was never very good at carrying momentum through corners. I was much more of a point and shoot, but I was strong enough and I worked really hard so I could handle a lot of power. Like the power wouldn't wear me out.
Yeah.
So I knew that I struggled with momentum. So when it was time to go, when I got into a corner and it was time to go, it was time to go. Like I needed the bike to get up and get out of the way because it was never going to happen where I was just going to stand up beautifully through a rut. That was just never going to happen for me.
So you're not the Kenny Roxon style.
No,
Right.
no. And I would love to have been able to ride that way. And I could have adjusted my bike accordingly, but it just comes down to, okay, well, this is how I ride well. And especially when you get in the heat of the moment in a race, you're going to do what's instinctual and habitual for you. And I knew that's just the way I ride. So I better do everything I can to make that style work. So yeah, a few other media outlets rode my bikes over the years too, and they all hated them. And for good reason. I totally understand it. Yeah. Because if I rode a bike that was built for someone like 5'10", 6 foot, like Michael Byrne,
normal person. No.
Yeah, exactly. No, totally. I hated it, right? It felt like I was riding a giant motorcycle that I couldn't really control, where my bike, I was kind of one with it. If I got onto this other motorcycle, I felt like it was riding me, and it was just way too big and I didn't have control over it. So, it's just one of those things, just like you said, it wasn't built to be an all around motorcycle. It wasn't built to be a production consumer-based
purpose.
bike.
Yeah. Purpose built.
Absolutely. It was built to be for me and for me only. And just really quickly, one other thing I would say on that, I remember being at the Atlanta Supercross, and I want to say it was around 2003. It was right before Ernesto Fonseca got on the Honda 450. He was still on a Honda two-stroke 250. And I remember looking at his motorcycle, and it was the smallest adult motorcycle I'd ever seen. And they had taken every step to make this, because we were about the same height. And they made this thing so tiny. It was like a souped up mini cycle, but
subframe cut,
right? Everything,
foot peg,
low spacer in the shock, subframe, foot pegs higher, seat cut out. I mean, just everything every trick you possibly had. But for him, now it felt built for him. It didn't feel like the motorcycle was too big. He could ride it to its potential. And I remember just staring at this motorcycle, wanting it so badly because I knew how lethal it would be for me, how great it would be on that level. But I think
it wasn't just that it was a works bike. It was the works bike that
for me, it was like it was custom built for me. Right. It was, it was the greatest bike I'd ever seen. And that was, if you had just taken the average Joe and looked at it, they probably wouldn't have noticed, but I immediately saw how small it was. I was like, look at that, look at this, look at that. And I was like, man, those are all things like the way they had done them. They were all Sano, subframe was like purpose built. It wasn't like cut, and they had everything just dialed, like foot pegs were custom built that height. And it was just awesome.
Yeah, it's like, well, you're in good company. I mean, the other bikes that I really hated with McGrath's steel frame Supercross bike.
Oh yeah.
That was horrible for me.
Probably insanely stiff, right?
Yeah, it was mostly the power delivery, but it was stiff. And then I rode Chad Reed's. I think it was a YZ250. I got to ride Reed and Villeman and someone else. No, you know what? It was his Yamaha Troy bike, but that had the stiffest front end I've ever experienced. And It just didn't move.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to ride all of Chad's bikes at some point. And yeah, I mean, that same thing with James Stewart. Their setup was the same, where the front end was like a BMX front end. There was no movement, but for them, they always said that's how they had the confidence to go so fast, is that
they could just stick it into something and
anything, right? And no matter how far they jumped, no matter how hard they hit something, the front wouldn't compress and send them over the front, right? That was their biggest fear, is I'm going to push this to the limit, but if the front compresses too hard, I'm going right over the bars. So they were always fighting against that.
And you watch how James crashed every time.
Exactly. Right. Yep. And you see why he was fearful of it, right? He was already, he was still doing it with that setup.
They couldn't make it stiff enough. But anyways, yeah, interesting. I like I said, I remember riding your race bike back in the day. And I always really enjoyed doing that, because I got to see different setup techniques, and it made it easier for me to understand why, people would want something, or to be able to suggest or say, hey, you should, when you're a smaller guy, look at this, or a taller guy, look at that. And luckily, for my size and weight and everything, I was right around where the stock stuff was, and for my speed, it all worked. But it doesn't work at your guys' level. It was a different game.
I don't think I would be a good candidate for production testing. So if anybody's looking to hire me for that, I don't think I'm a good fit for that.
Right. Well, hey, thanks for coming on, and we'll keep in touch out in the future. See ya.
Okay, guys. See ya.